The massive doors of classroom Sigma 7 slid open with a soft hiss. Lee Hana stepped inside, carrying a small bag and wearing the standard academy uniform. She was smaller than most beings in the room, standing only 5 feet tall with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her brown eyes scanned the curved amphitheater where 23 alien students sat in various shaped seats, designed for their different body types. Professor Vektar stood at the front of the room. His crystalline body caught the artificial sunlight, streaming through the dome above. Each facet of his diamond-like skin reflected different colors as he moved. His voice echoed with a musical tone when he spoke. "Class, we have a new member joining us today. This is Lee Hana from Earth. She is part of the exchange program between the Galactic Academy and the Terran Education Council." Whispers filled the room immediately. The sound came in different forms. Some students made clicking noises with mandibles. Others communicated through color changes on their skin. A few used subsonic vibrations that made the air itself seem to buzz. Hana stood calmly as dozens of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs focused on her. She had prepared for this moment during the long journey from Earth. The orientation materials had warned her that humans were still new to the galactic community. Most species had only heard stories about her kind. "Please take the seat in section C7, Professor Vektar said, pointing with one of his 4 arms toward an empty chair. As Hana walked up the curved steps, she noticed how the conversation stopped when she passed each row. A pair of reptilian beings watched her with golden eyes that never blinked. Their scales shifted from green to brown as she walked by. These were Sekthari, according to her study materials. The male was named Kang Do-yun, and the female was Park Jin-woo. In the next section sat 3 beings that looked like they were made of pure energy contained in humanoid shapes. Their forms flickered between blue and white light. These were the Syrians. Kim Seo-hui seemed to be the leader of their small group. Next to her sat Choi Min-ho and Jung Si-won. All 3 turned their glowing heads to watch Hana pass. The Jarati students made more obvious sounds. Their insect-like bodies clicked and chirped as Hana walked by. Yoon So-min was the largest of the Yi. 3. With 4 arms and wings that she kept folded against her back. Jung Hyun-woo and Song Woo-jin flanked her on either side. Their compound eyes tracked every movement Hana made. Near the back of the room sat the Greythak students. They looked like living rocks with arms and legs carved from granite. Han Taiwan was the biggest, standing nearly 8 feet tall even while sitting. Park Hyunjin and Kim Youngmin were smaller, but still towered over most other species. Their stone faces showed no expression, but their eyes followed Hana like the others. The strangest beings in the room were the Quellan students. They looked like large amphibians with smooth, wet skin that changed colors constantly. Bei Ji-yeon was bright blue today, while Oh Min-ji showed swirls of purple and green across her body. Lee Jimin kept shifting between red and orange patterns. Finally, there were the Morthak students. These beings could change their shape at will. Right now, Lee Sun-ho looked almost human except for his silver skin and lack of hair. Nam Ji-won had chosen a form that was taller and thinner than any natural species. Park Hyunjin had multiple arms and eyes positioned around his head. Hana reached her assigned seat and sat down. The chair adjusted automatically to fit her human proportions. She placed her bag on the floor and looked toward Professor Vektar, ready to begin the lesson. "Today we will be conducting preliminary assessments," the professor announced. "These tests will help me understand where each student stands academically. The results will determine your group assignments for the semester." Tablets materialized in front of each student. The devices looked different for each species but functioned the same way. Hana's tablet appeared as a simple flat screen with a human-style interface. "You will have 2 standard time units to complete the assessment. It covers mathematics, science, logic, and spatial reasoning. Begin now." Hana touched her tablet, and the first question appeared. It was a complex mathematical equation involving multiple variables. She had seen similar problems in her Earth studies, but never quite like this. The equation seemed to describe the orbital mechanics of a 7-planet system with 3 suns. She worked through the problem step by step. Her approach was different from what she had been taught on Earth. Instead of following a strict formula, she visualized the system in her mind. She imagined the planets moving through space and calculated their interactions based on what felt right. Around the room, other students worked on their tablets. The Sectari twins moved their clawed fingers quickly across their screens. Their reptilian brains were designed for rapid calculations. The Syrians seemed to solve problems without moving at all. Their energy forms simply pulsed with different colors as they thought. The Zerathi students used all 4 of their arms to work on multiple problems at once. Their compound eyes could focus on different parts of the screen simultaneously. The Grethak students moved more slowly but with absolute precision. Every answer they gave was carefully considered and double-checked. The shape-shifting Morthak students changed their form as they worked. Lee Sunho grew extra fingers to type faster. Nam Jiwon created additional eyes to read multiple questions at once. The Quellan students worked steadily, their skin colors shifting with their emotional states as they encountered difficult problems. Hana continued working through the assessment. She found that many problems could be solved in ways that were not obvious. Where other students might use complex formulas, she found patterns and shortcuts. Her human brain seemed to make connections that were not immediately logical, but proved to be correct. As the time limit approached, students began finishing their assessments. The Sectari twins were first, followed quickly by the Syrians. The Yao, Zerathi students finished as a group, while the Grethak students used every available second to check their work. Hana submitted her assessment with 30 seconds to spare. She had answered every question, though she was not sure her methods would be understood by the grading system. Tablets will now be collected for scoring, Professor Vektar announced. Results will be posted tomorrow morning. Class dismissed. As students began to leave, Hana gathered her bag and headed toward the door. She could feel eyes watching her from every direction. Conversation started again as soon as she passed, but now the whispers seemed more intense. She had taken the first step into her new academic life. Tomorrow would show whether her human approach to problem-solving would be accepted in this galactic classroom. The next morning, Hana arrived at classroom Sigma 7 15 minutes early. She wanted to review her notes before class started. The room was empty except for the cleaning drones that floated silently between the seats, removing dust and adjusting the furniture. She took her usual seat and opened her study tablet. The preliminary assessment results would be posted soon. Hana felt nervous about how she had performed compared to her alien classmates. Each species had evolved for thousands of years to excel in different areas of intelligence. Other students began arriving in small groups. The Sectari twins, Kang Do-hyun and Park Jin-woo, entered together as always. Their scales were a bright green color, which meant they were in good moods. They glanced at Hana briefly before taking their seats in the front row. The Syrian students floated into the room next. Kim Seo-hui, Choi Min-ho, and Jung Si-won moved like they were dancing through the air. Their energy forms pulsed with soft, blue light. They settled into their specialized seats that helped contain their electromagnetic fields. Yoon Soman led the Zerathi students into the classroom. Her wings buzzed quietly as she walked. Jang Hyun-woo and Song Woo-jin followed behind her, their compound eyes scanning the room. All 3 made soft clicking sounds as they communicated in their native language. The heavy footsteps of the Grethak students echoed through the room. Han Taiwan entered first, his massive stone body casting long shadows. Park Hyunjin and Kim Youngmin walked beside him, their granite faces showing no emotion. They sat in reinforced chairs designed to support their weight. The Quellan students slithered into the room with smooth, flowing movements. Baejion's skin was a calm blue color today. Oh Minji displayed swirls of green and purple across her body. Lee Jimin kept changing colors rapidly, which meant she was excited or nervous about something. Finally, the Morthak students arrived. Lee Sunho had chosen to look almost exactly like a human today, except his skin was silver and his eyes were completely black. Nam Jiwon appeared as a tall, thin being with 4 arms. Park Hyunjin had taken the form of something that looked like a mixture of several different species. As more students filled the room, Hana noticed something strange. Usually, some students would nod at her or make small greeting gestures. Today, everyone seemed to avoid looking in her direction. When she tried to make eye contact with Park Jinwoo, the Sekthari female quickly looked away. Professor Vektar entered the room exactly on time. His crystalline body sparkled as he moved to the front of the classroom. He activated the large display screen with a wave of his hand. "Assessment results are now available," he announced. The screen filled with a list of student names and scores. Hana looked at the display and felt her heart skip. Her name was at the top of the list. She had scored higher than every other student in the class. The second highest score belonged to Kim Seo-hui, one of the Syrian students. Han Taiwan, the largest Grethak student, was third. Around the room, students stared at the results in silence. Some made quiet sounds of surprise or confusion. The Jarathi students clicked their mandibles together rapidly. The Quellan students' skin colors shifted to darker shades. "This is quite remarkable," Professor Vektar said. "Lee Hana has achieved the highest preliminary score in this class's history. Her approach to several problems was completely unique." Hana felt a mixture of pride and worry. She was happy about her performance but concerned about how her classmates would react. She could feel many eyes staring at her now. After class ended, Hana hoped to join one of the study groups that usually formed in the hallway. She had heard other students talking about meeting in the library to work on homework together. She approached the Sekthari twins first. "Hello," she said to Kang Do-hyun and Park Jinwoo. "Are you planning to study together today? I was wondering if I could join you." The two reptilian beings looked at each other. Their scales shifted from green to a neutral brown color. Kang Do-hyun spoke first. "We already have a complete study group," he said. "Sekthari work best with other Sekthari. Our thinking patterns are very different from yours." Park Jinwoo nodded in agreement. "Yes, very different. It would not be helpful for any of us." They walked away quickly, leaving Hana standing alone in the hallway. She decided to try approaching another group. The Syrian students were floating near the library entrance. "Excuse me," Hana said to Kim Seo-hui. "I heard you discussing the quantum mechanics assignment. Could I study with your group?" Kim Seo-hui's energy form flickered between blue and red. The other Syrian students moved closer to her, forming a tight circle. "Human minds are too chaotic for telepathic species to work with," Kim Seo-hui said. "We need mental harmony in our study groups. Your thought patterns would disturb our concentration." Choi, Minho and Young Siwon both pulsed with agreement. Their light forms grew brighter as they communicated telepathically with each other. Hana could not understand their silent conversation, but she could tell they were talking about her. "I understand," Hana said quietly. "Maybe another time." But the Syrian students had already floated away toward the library, leaving trails of light behind them. Hana tried approaching the Jarathi students next. Yoon So-min was organizing her notes with her forearms while Jang Hyun-woo and Song Woo-jin waited nearby. "Would it be possible to join your study group?" Hana asked. "I'm having trouble with some of the advanced mathematics concepts." The three insect-like beings began clicking and chirping rapidly in their own language. Yoon So-min's wings buzzed with agitation. Finally, she turned to address Hana. "Jarathi students process information at very high speeds," she said. "We work through problems much faster than single brain species. You would slow us down significantly." Jang Hyun-woo added, "Our methods are too advanced for primitive thinking patterns." Song Woo-jin simply stared at Hana with his compound eyes before following the other two down the hallway. Hana felt a growing sense of isolation as she was rejected by group after group. The Grethak students told her that humans were too impulsive for their methodical approach. The Quellan students said her emotional variations would interfere with their chemical communication. Even the shape-shifting Morthak students claimed that humans were too rigid in their thinking. By the end of the week, a clear pattern had emerged. Every alien species in the class had found reasons why they could not work with the human student. They formed their own species-based study groups and excluded Hana from all collaborative activities. During laboratory sessions, no one wanted to be her partner. In group discussions, other students would form circles that somehow never included Her chair. When Professor Vektar assigned team projects, Hana was always the last one chosen, and only when the professor insisted that all students must participate. The alien students had convinced themselves that they were protecting their academic performance by avoiding the unpredictable human. They whispered among themselves about human emotional instability and primitive cognitive development. They shared stories they had heard about human violence and chaos. What they did not realize was that their isolation strategy was about to backfire in ways they could never imagine. 3 weeks had passed since the isolation began. Hana sat alone in the academy cafeteria, eating her lunch while watching the other students gather in their species groups. The Sekthari twins shared raw meat from their homeworld. The Syrian students absorbed energy directly from special light panels. The Zirathi students consumed a sweet nectar that made their wings buzz with pleasure. Hana ate her simple human food and observed how each group interacted. She noticed patterns that the aliens themselves seemed unaware of. The Sekthari always made decisions based on pack hierarchy. The Syrians shared thoughts so completely that they rarely had original ideas. The Zirathi worked incredibly fast, but never questioned their methods. What her classmates saw as isolation, Hana was beginning to understand as freedom. The first major assignment came the following week. Professor Vektar announced a complex engineering challenge during morning class. You must design a space station that can support 3 different species with conflicting environmental needs, he explained. The station must be efficient, cost-effective, and innovative. You may work in groups of up to 4 students. Immediately, the alien students began forming their usual groups. The Sekthari twins partnered with 2 Grethak students. The Syrians formed a group of 3. The Zirathi students teamed up with some Quellan students. The shape-shifting Morthak students created their own group. Hana raised her hand. Professor, may I work alone on this assignment? The classroom fell silent. Professor Vektar's crystalline face showed surprise. This project is designed for group collaboration, Miss Hana. Are you certain you want to attempt it solo? Yes, sir. I believe I can handle it. Several students made sounds of disbelief. Kang Do-hyun whispered something to Park Jinwoo that made her scales shift to an amused yellow color. The Zirathi students clicked their mandibles in what sounded like laughter. Very well, Professor Vektar said. You have 2 weeks to complete your design. That afternoon, while the other groups met in the library to plan their projects, Hana went to the engineering lab alone. She spread out digital blueprints and began sketching ideas. Instead of following the standard approach of designing separate sections for each species, she started thinking about how to make the environments work together. The thermal beings needed extremely high temperatures. The crystalline species required specific mineral compositions in their atmosphere. The liquid species lived in a completely aqueous environment. Most engineers would simply build 3 separate areas and connect them with corridors. But Hana saw possibilities that others missed. What if the heat from the thermal section could power the mineral processing for the crystalline section? What if the waste products from one environment became nutrients for another? What if the station was not just a place where 3 species lived separately, but a place where they lived in balance? She worked late into the night, her human creativity finding connections that more logical minds might overlook. She imagined the station as a living system rather than a simple structure. Meanwhile, the alien groups followed predictable patterns. The Sekthari and Grethak group created a massive, heavily armored station that prioritized defense and durability. The Syrian group designed something elegant and efficient but completely traditional. The Zirathi and Quellan group produced a technically perfect station that followed every engineering rule exactly. Each group was limited by their species' way of thinking. The Sekthari could only see threats to defend against. The Syrians shared ideas so completely that no one contributed anything truly new. The Zirathi worked so fast that they never stopped to consider alternatives. 2 weeks later, the presentations began. The alien groups presented their designs with confidence. Each station was competent and functional. They met all the basic requirements and would work as intended. Then Hana stood up to present her design. Her station looked different from all the others. Instead of 3 separate sections connected by corridors, Her design showed three environments that flowed into each other like organs in a body. The heat exchange systems were works of art. The atmospheric processing created a closed loop that wasted nothing. The structural design was both beautiful and incredibly strong, but the most impressive part was how she had solved problems that the other groups had not even noticed. Her station could adapt to changes in population. It could modify its environments based on the specific needs of individual inhabitants. It could even repair itself using resources recycled from waste products. "This is remarkable," Professor Vector said as he examined her blueprints. "You have created not just a station, but an ecosystem. How did you develop this approach?" Hana thought carefully before answering. "I imagined what it would be like to live there. Then I imagined what the station itself would need to stay healthy and grow. Instead of building something that just meets requirements, I tried to build something that could evolve." The alien students stared at her design in silence. Kim Seo-hui's energy form flickered between different colors rapidly. Han Tae-wan leaned forward in his stone chair to get a better look at the blueprints. Even the Jirathi students had stopped their constant clicking. Professor Vector continued examining the design. "Your solution uses 30% fewer materials than the next most efficient design. It produces zero waste. It can support population growth of up to 300% without major modifications. This is truly innovative thinking." He turned to address the entire class. "Miss Hana's project demonstrates the value of approaching problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously. While each group excelled in their species' particular strengths, she found ways to combine different approaches into something greater than the sum of its parts." After class, Hana gathered her materials while the other students filed out quietly. She noticed that some of them kept looking back at her design, which was still displayed on the main screen. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Hana felt truly confident. The isolation that was supposed to break her spirit had instead freed her mind. Without the pressure to conform to alien thinking patterns, her human creativity had found room to flourish. She did not know that several of her classmates were beginning to question their decision to exclude her. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they would soon begin to grow. The second major assignment came 3 weeks after the engineering project. Professor Vector stood at the front of the classroom holding a complex crystalline device that pulsed with different colored lights. "This is a quantum probability calculator," he announced. "It can predict the likelihood of various outcomes in complex systems. Your task is to use it to solve a series of mathematical scenarios that involve chaos theory and multiple variables." He placed the device on his desk where all students could see it. "However, there is only one calculator for the entire class. You must work together to complete all scenarios within the given time frame. This will require cooperation and efficient time management." The alien students immediately began discussing how to organize their efforts. The natural assumption was that they would work in their established species groups, with each group taking turns using the calculator. Hana listened to their planning but did not participate. She had learned not to expect inclusion in group activities. Instead, she studied the scenarios Professor Vector had provided and began working on them, using only her tablet and her human ability to visualize complex systems. The first scenario involved predicting weather patterns on a planet with 3 moons and irregular solar radiation. The Sekthari group took the calculator first, spending 2 hours running calculations and producing a detailed but conventional analysis. While they worked with the machine, Hana sat alone and thought about the problem differently. She imagined herself standing on the planet's surface, feeling how the different gravitational pulls would affect atmospheric pressure. She visualized the solar radiation as waves of energy that created patterns in the sky. The Syrian group used the calculator. Next, their telepathic abilities allowed them to process the quantum data very quickly, but their solutions followed predictable mathematical models. Hana continued working on her tablet, using human intuition to fill in gaps where she lacked precise data. She created rough approximations based on what felt right, then tested these guesses against the logical constraints of the problem. Each alien group spent their allocated time with the calculator, producing competent but unremarkable results. When all groups had finished, Professor Vector asked each team to present their findings. The alien presentations were technically sound but similar to each other. Each group had used the calculator to generate precise predictions based on established algorithms. Their answers were correct within acceptable margins of error. Then Hana raised her hand. "Professor, I worked on the scenarios without using the calculator. May I present my results?" The classroom buzzed with surprised sounds. How could anyone solve quantum probability problems without the proper equipment? "Certainly," Professor Vector said, though his crystalline face showed puzzlement. Hana stood and activated the main display screen. Her first weather prediction appeared as a dynamic, swirling pattern that seemed to move and breathe with life. "The three-moon system creates a resonance effect," she explained. "Instead of calculating each gravitational influence separately, I looked for the rhythm that emerges when they work together. The weather doesn't just follow mathematical rules, it dances." Her prediction showed storm systems that pulsed in harmony with the moon's orbital patterns. Rain fell in spirals that matched the planet's magnetic field. Temperature zones shifted like living creatures responding to their environment. Professor Vector ran her predictions through the quantum calculator for verification. The results matched within 2% accuracy. "Fascinating," he murmured. "How did you achieve this level of precision without the calculator?" "I imagined living in that weather system," Hana said. "Then I asked what the planet itself would want to do." The second scenario involved population dynamics in a colony where 4 different species competed for resources. Again, the alien groups had produced mathematically correct but predictable analyses using the calculator. Hana's approach was completely different. Instead of treating the species as abstract variables, she had imagined their daily lives, their fears, their hopes, their relationships with each other. Her analysis showed how cooperation could emerge naturally from competition, creating population cycles that were more stable than anyone else had predicted. The third scenario was the most complex, predicting economic fluctuations in a galactic, trading system with thousands of variables. The alien groups had spent hours with the calculator, generating enormous data sets and complex probability matrices. Hana had solved it by imagining herself as a single trader in the system, then expanding her perspective to see how individual decisions rippled outward to create large-scale patterns. Her economic model showed boom and bust cycles that followed emotional rhythms rather than pure logic. Every one of her predictions proved more accurate than the calculator-generated results. Oh Minji, one of the Quellan students, stared at Hana's economic model with her large amphibian eyes. Her skin had turned a deep purple color that indicated intense concentration. "How is this possible?" she whispered to her groupmate Beijian. "We used the most advanced quantum calculator in the galaxy, and a human with a simple tablet outperformed us." Park Hyunjin, the massive Grethek student, leaned over to examine Hana's weather predictions more closely. His stone face showed no expression, but his eyes moved rapidly as he analyzed her approach. "Her methods make no logical sense," he said quietly to Kim Youngmin. "But her results are undeniably superior. She sees patterns that our calculations miss entirely." The Jirathi students were having their own crisis of confidence. Jang Hyunwoo's wings buzzed with agitation as he compared his group's population analysis to Hana's organic model. "We process information faster than any other species," he clicked to Song Woo-jin. "How can a single brain organism outthink our collective processing power?" Even the telepathic Syrians were disturbed. Kim Seo-hui's energy form flickered erratically as she tried to understand how Hana had achieved such accuracy. "Her mind works in ways we cannot comprehend," she communicated to Choi Minho and Jung Siwon. "Perhaps our assumptions about human cognitive limitations were incorrect." The shape-shifting Morthak students were the most unsettled of all. Their entire identity was based on adaptability and flexibility, yet they had been completely outmaneuvered by someone they considered primitive. Lee Sunho morphed his form nervously, cycling through different shapes as he processed what he had witnessed. If humans can think in ways that surpass our technology, what else have we misunderstood about them? As the class period ended, the alien students filed out quietly. Many of them cast confused glances at Hana, who was calmly packing her tablet into her bag. For the first time since the isolation began, some students were starting to wonder if they had made a mistake. The human they had dismissed as chaotic and primitive was consistently outperforming their most advanced methods. The cracks in their united front were beginning to widen. The semester's final project was announced on a cold morning when frost covered the academy's dome windows. Professor Vektar entered the classroom carrying a data pad that glowed with urgent red symbols. "Students, you will be working on a real crisis today," he announced. "The Galactic Council has presented us with an actual emergency situation. Your solutions may be implemented to save lives." The classroom atmosphere immediately became tense. Real emergencies meant real consequences. Failure would not just result in poor grades but could lead to the deaths of actual beings. Professor Vektar activated the main display screen. An image appeared showing a planet covered in swirling storms and volcanic activity. "This is Kepler 442c, also known as New Harmony," he explained. "It is home to a multi-species colony of 50,000 inhabitants. The planet is experiencing catastrophic climate destabilization. The colonists have 6 weeks before their environment becomes completely uninhabitable." More images flashed across the screen. Cities flooding as sea levels rose rapidly. Massive storms that lasted for weeks at a time. Volcanic eruptions that filled the sky with toxic ash. Agricultural zones turning into deserts almost overnight. The colony includes thermal beings who need high temperatures, crystalline species that require specific atmospheric compositions, and aquatic species that live in underwater cities. Any solution must protect all three populations while remaining economically feasible. Professor Vektar looked around the room seriously. "The Galactic Council's emergency response team has been working on this problem for 3 months without finding an adequate solution. You have 2 weeks to succeed where they have failed." The alien students immediately began forming their usual groups. The crisis was too important to risk working with unfamiliar thinking patterns. They needed to rely on their proven species-based approaches. The Sekthari twins partnered with the Grethak students, focusing on defensive strategies. Their plan involved building massive underground bunkers that could protect each species group separately. It was practical and safe, but would require enormous resources and would essentially abandon the planet's surface forever. The Syrian students worked together to create an elegant solution involving atmospheric processors and weather control satellites. Their design was technically beautiful and would work perfectly under ideal conditions. However, it required technology that did not yet exist and would take decades to develop. The Zarathi students teamed up with the Quellan students to produce a mathematically perfect evacuation plan. They calculated exactly how many ships would be needed, optimal departure schedules, and ideal destination planets for each species. Their solution was flawless, but meant giving up on New Harmony entirely. The Morthak students created an adaptive terraforming system that could modify the planet's environment in real time. Their approach was innovative but incredibly complex, requiring thousands of specialized machines and constant maintenance. Each group worked within their species' natural strengths and limitations. The Sekthari saw the problem as a threat to defend against. The Syrians approached it as an engineering challenge requiring perfect coordination. The Zarathi treated it as a logistics problem to be solved with pure efficiency. The Morthak students viewed it as an opportunity to demonstrate their adaptability. Hannah sat alone and read through all the data about New Harmony. She studied geological reports, population demographics, economic analyses, and cultural information about each species group. But instead of focusing on technical solutions, she tried to understand what life was like for the colonists. She imagined waking up each morning not knowing if her home would still exist by evening. She thought about parents trying to keep their children calm while storms raged outside. She visualized farmers watching their crops die and wondering how to feed their families. Then she began thinking about the planet itself. New Harmony had supported life for millions of years before the colonists arrived. The climate destabilization had started only recently, triggered by industrial activities that disrupted natural cycles. What if the solution was not to fight the planet, but to help it heal? Hana spent the next week developing an approach that none of the other groups had considered. Instead of trying to control or escape the planetary crisis, she designed a plan that would work with the natural systems to restore balance. Her solution involved strategic reforestation using native plants that could absorb excess atmospheric carbon. She proposed redirecting volcanic heat through underground channels to warm areas that had become too cold, while cooling areas that had become too hot. She designed floating cities that could rise and fall with changing sea levels rather than fighting against them. Most importantly, she found ways for each species to contribute their natural abilities to the healing process. Thermal beings could help regulate underground temperature systems. Crystalline species could grow mineral formations that would stabilize soil composition. Aquatic species could manage ocean current patterns that would distribute heat more evenly around the planet. Her plan did not just save the colony. It made New Harmony stronger and more stable than it had been before the crisis. 2 weeks later, all groups presented their solutions to Professor Vector and a panel of emergency response experts who attended via holographic communication. 3 alien groups presented first. Each solution was competent within its own framework. The defensive bunkers would keep people safe but at enormous cost. The atmospheric processors would work perfectly if they could be built. The evacuation plan would save lives by abandoning the planet. The adaptive terraforming system would solve the problem through constant technological intervention. Then Hana presented her restoration plan. The emergency response panel listened in silence as she explained how the colony could work with the planet instead of against it. She showed how her solution would cost 90% less than any other proposal while providing better long-term stability. Your approach treats the symptoms and the cause simultaneously, observed Dr. Zeklon, the lead emergency coordinator. You have found a way to make the crisis strengthen the colony rather than destroy it. Another panel member, Commander Thex, leaned forward intently. Miss Hana, your solution could be implemented immediately using resources the colony already possesses. How did you develop this approach? Hana thought carefully before answering. I tried to understand what the planet was trying to tell us. The crisis started when we stopped listening to the natural systems. The solution was to start listening again. Professor Vector announced the results at the end of the presentation session. The Galactic Council has accepted Miss Hana's proposal for immediate implementation. Emergency response teams are being deployed to New Harmony within the week. The classroom fell completely silent. The alien students stared at Hana with expressions of shock and disbelief. She had not just outperformed them again. She had solved a crisis that had stumped the galaxy's best experts. Park Jinwoo, the Sekthari female who had first refused to let Hana join their study group, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. How is this possible? We have advanced technology, thousands of years of evolution, specialized cognitive abilities. How can a single human surpass all of our combined efforts? Kim Seohui's energy form pulsed with confusion, and something that might have been shame. We have been working in isolation from the very perspective we needed most. The silence stretched on as the full implications became clear. Their campaign to isolate Hana had backfired completely. Instead of limiting her performance, it had freed her to think in ways that their species-based groups could never achieve. They had isolated themselves from the innovative thinking they desperately needed. The academy cafeteria felt different the next morning. Hana sat at her usual table, eating breakfast alone as she had for months. But today, something had changed in the atmosphere around her. Conversations at other tables seemed quieter, more uncertain. She noticed Park Jinwoo glancing in her direction several times. The Sekthari female's scales shifted between different shades of green and brown, indicating internal conflict. Finally, Park Jinwoo stood up and walked over to Hana's table. May I sit with you? She asked, her voice hesitant. Hana looked up in surprise. This was the first time any student had voluntarily approached her since the isolation began. Of course, Hana said, gesturing to an empty chair. Park Jinwoo sat down carefully, her reptilian features tense with nervousness. I wanted to apologize for how we have treated you. When you scored highest on the preliminary assessment, we felt threatened. We convinced ourselves that isolating you was protecting our academic standing." She paused, her scales shifting to a darker green that indicated shame. "We were wrong. Your solution for new harmony showed us that we have been limiting ourselves by excluding your perspective." Hana set down her eating utensil and looked at Park Jinwoo directly. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because we need your help," Park Jinwoo admitted. "Professor Vektar announced this morning that all remaining assignments will be collaborative projects. No more individual work. We can either learn to work together, or we will all fail." Other students began approaching the table. Oh Minji, the Quellan student, slithered over with her skin displaying nervous purple patterns. "We have been discussing this among ourselves," Oh Minji said. "Each of our species has particular strengths, but you have something we lack entirely. You see connections that we miss. You find solutions where we only see problems." Kim Youngman, one of the massive Grethak students, lumbered over to join the conversation. His stone face showed more expression than Hana had ever seen before. "My people value logic and methodical thinking above all else," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "But your approach to problem-solving follows patterns we cannot understand. It should not work according to our mathematical models, yet it produces superior results consistently." More students gathered around Hana's table. The Jarathi students clicked their mandibles in what she now recognized as excited curiosity, rather than mockery. The Syrian students' energy forms pulsed with eager anticipation. Even the shape-shifting Morthak students had taken forms that appeared more open and welcoming. Lee Jimin, the Quellan student whose skin had been shifting red and orange patterns, spoke up. "We have been trying to solve problems using only our individual species approaches, but you combine different ways of thinking into something new. Could you teach us how to do that?" Hana felt a mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to remind them of the months of rejection and isolation. But another part of her, the part that had always been curious about different perspectives, was intrigued by the possibility of genuine collaboration. "I am not sure I can teach you to think like humans," Hana said carefully. "But maybe we can learn to combine human thinking with your species' abilities." Professor Vektar entered the cafeteria at that moment and noticed the unusual gathering around Hana's table. His crystalline face showed interest as he approached. "This is an encouraging development," he observed. "I was wondering how long it would take for you to realize that diversity of thought produces better results than isolated specialization." Yoon So-min, the largest of the Jarathi students, buzzed her wings nervously. "Professor, how do we work effectively with thinking patterns that are so different from our own?" Professor Vektar's faceted features seemed to smile. "That is exactly the question you should be asking. The greatest achievements in galactic history have come from collaboration between species with complementary abilities. Your assignment for the rest of the semester will be to discover how to make such collaboration successful." The first joint project began that afternoon. Professor Vektar presented them with a complex scenario involving the design of a new type of spacecraft that could adapt to different environments automatically. Instead of forming species-based groups, the students arranged themselves in a large circle with Hana at the center. She felt strange being the focus of attention after months of being ignored, but she was determined to make the collaboration work. "Let us start by having each species explain their natural approach to this problem," Hana suggested. "Then we can look for ways to combine different approaches." The Sekthari students described their instinctive focus on defense and survival systems. The Syrians explained their telepathic methods for creating perfect coordination between ship components. The Jarathi students detailed their high-speed processing techniques for managing complex systems simultaneously. The Grethak students shared their methodical approach to structural integrity and durability. The Quellan students discussed their chemical communication methods for monitoring environmental changes. The Morthak students described their shape-shifting insights into adaptive design principles. As each species explained their perspective, Hana began seeing connections that none of them had noticed individually. The Sekthari's survival instincts could be combined with the Syrians' coordination abilities to create ships that responded to threats before they became dangerous. The Jirathi's processing speed could be linked to the Grethak's structural knowledge to build ships that optimized their own design in real time. What if we design the ship like a living organism? Hana suggested. Each species' strengths could be like different organs in a body, working together to keep the whole system healthy and adaptive. The alien students began building on her idea, each contributing elements that complemented the others. The Quellan students' chemical communication could serve as the ship's nervous system. The Morthak students' adaptation principles could guide the ship's ability to modify itself for different environments. As they worked together, something remarkable happened. The alien students discovered that working with Hana did not diminish their own abilities. Instead, her human creativity acted as a catalyst that enhanced their natural strengths. Her chaotic, intuitive thinking sparked new ideas in their more ordered minds. The Syrians found that Hana's non-telepathic perspective helped them think in ways that pure mental coordination could not achieve. The Jirathi discovered that human, emotional patterns added valuable unpredictability to their logical processing. The Grethak students learned that Hana's flexible thinking could strengthen their methodical approaches rather than undermining them. By the end of the week, they had designed a spacecraft that was unlike anything in galactic history. It could adapt to any environment, repair itself using available materials, and even evolve new capabilities based on the challenges it encountered. Professor Vektar examined their collaborative design with obvious amazement. This is extraordinary work. You have created something that incorporates the best aspects of 12 different species' cognitive approaches. The Galactic Council will want to study this design immediately. The success of their first collaboration changed everything. Species barriers that had existed for thousands of years began breaking down as students discovered the benefits of diverse thinking. Study groups formed that included multiple species working together. Laboratory partnerships crossed traditional boundaries. Hana found herself at the center of a new social dynamic. Instead of being isolated, she became the bridge that connected different ways of thinking. Her human ability to combine disparate perspectives made her invaluable to every collaborative effort. The alien students learned that their attempt to isolate the human had actually isolated them from their own potential. By working only with their own species, they had trapped themselves in limited thinking patterns. Hana's inclusion opened up possibilities they had never imagined. More importantly, they discovered that diversity was not a threat to be contained, but a strength to be embraced. Each species brought unique gifts to collaborative efforts, and the combination produced results that surpassed what any single group could achieve alone. By the semester's end, Class Sigma 7 had become legendary. Throughout the Galactic Academy, their innovative solutions were being studied and implemented across the galaxy. Other classes began requesting mixed species collaboration as standard practice. The isolation campaign that was meant to break one human student had instead broken down the barriers that had limited them all. In trying to exclude Hana from their success, the alien students had nearly excluded themselves from their greatest achievements. The galaxy was learning its first lesson about the value of human perspective. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the ability to think differently than everyone else expects.